Thank you, Cindy. Yes, indeed, I am joined by the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Mr. Mantashe. Mr. Mantashe, good evening and welcome to ANN7.
Goeienaand. Hoe gaan dit?
Oh, lovely. So we are that jovial. We're speaking in Afrikaans.
I'm speaking Afrikaans today because I'm a South African. Yes.
No, it's symbolic of an inclusive, interracial South Africa. Yeah. So we do commend you for being so well-spoken or well-versed in the Afrikaans language.
Yes. Ke kana bua le wena ka Sesotho ebile.
Nazo. But Secretary General, we do want to get to the nitty-gritties of tomorrow. Today is a great atmosphere. We're all enjoying ourselves. We understand today is where you're going to support as the political party. But tomorrow, what are some of the issues that we should expect to feature prominently? We've heard a bit earlier, you touched on land reform. You also touched on the economy because we are indeed in a technical recession. We have seen downgrades. But beyond that, what else can we expect?
Tomorrow we're down to business. The first 2 days are going to be dedicated to the health of the organization. We'll give quite a detailed analysis of where we are and diagnose the challenges and the problems facing the organization, link those to policy documents on strategies and tactics and the organizational renewal, and spend 2 days on that issue. Because we can have all the good policies. If you don't have a vehicle to execute, then you are going to be having good policies and not execute. That's why we spend 2 days on the organization. It is actually replacing what would have been the content of the National Consultative Conference as requested by veterans and stalwarts. When they pulled out, we said we continue with the analysis because it is the responsibility of the organization to deal with those issues.
But then beyond that, will we see other issues? Yes, organizational renewal, but will we see issues such as the poor showing of the African National Conference? It's relative. Some could say it wasn't a poor showing. But will you be discussing 2016 elections?
When we diagnose weakness of the organization, you can't miss that massive decline of 8% between 2014 and 2016. We will pay attention to that. Actually, one of the things we're known for is that when we do our diagnosis, we're quite brutal to ourselves and quite honest, so that we can actually get real solutions. And the 5 days must help with that. And policy decisions that will be discussed over the following 5 days must talk to solutions for organizational problems.
And then the revolutionary tone that we've heard of late coming out of the African National Congress with the famous phrase of radical economic transformation. When we talk of radical economic transformation, many would say that this is the time where we get to see if this will be confined to rhetoric or indeed it will find its way into government policy. What exactly would you say this is? Rhetoric or indeed we will see the policy?
Can I tell you, National Democratic Revolution in itself is quite a revolutionary program. It's quite a serious problem. It's radical by its nature. I always say to the ANC, a debate that I have not won, I always say we must call this a more radical economic transformation, because the first phase of the revolution itself was radical. Because if you can talk to your enemy and transfer power when the prospects of defeating your enemy are remote, then that is radical. The work that has been done in terms of delivering basic services to our people is radical. I was talking to a journalist from the US and said, from 1994 to now, we took access to electricity from 39 to 86, access to clean drinking water from 42 to 92. That is radical. 4 million houses given to people at the bottom end of society. Increasing the number of students, yourselves, beneficiaries of change. Where in 1994 there was 150,000 students in university, today there are over 850,000. So that phase was radical. But we did very little to accelerate economic transformation. That is where the more radical comes in. And we talk about basic issues, ownership, control systems. We talk about the economy, dealing with the three contradictions of race, which is the oppression, of a class, which is the exploitation, and gender oppression, which is the triple oppression of women and patriarchal relations in society. If it doesn't address that, it is not radical enough.
And then unity within the party. We have seen where we've heard a number of differing voices in the media space. Some they've been debating, where much of your conversations were not in private or confined to just party structures. We've all seen them play out. Are you looking to also address that, where perhaps there's limited confusion, where we hear the ANC speaking in one voice? Are you looking to tackle that very issue?
It always happens when a movement goes through a difficult period. We'll address that, because when you go through a difficult period, sometimes you go to the extremes. You'll have an extreme I call adventurism and populism, then counterposed to conservatism, which almost say don't change and fear change. Once they are counterposed, then they explode into the public, because we're going through a difficult period. If we do the diagnosis properly, we must pull everybody in line and say the common purpose of the ANC is contained in the National Democratic Revolution. If we do that, we'll pull forces together and not go for a shootout in the meeting of the ANC, the National Policy Conference of the ANC.
And then the succession conversation, any chance that it will find or rear its head into the policy discussion, or not at all?
It may impact on the behavior. But the reason that we have a policy conference 6 months before the conference is to avoid venturing into that debate. But it will impact on the behavior, because people will be positioning themselves to win favors of delegates for their own perspective, and therefore try to whisper through their candidates, which will be tantamount to ill discipline, because we want to focus on policy issues now, so that when we go to the national conference, we don't get distracted from discussing policy by the elections.
But beyond or even prior to the policy conference, it seemed that you were not keen on allowing members to enter that fray of succession. It's as if you were stifling debate around that. Has that been a good move, or perhaps you could argue for it? Why exactly has the African National Conference decided to stifle debate around the succession?
You have not followed us closely. You see, I always call that distance learning. What is learning about papers?
All right.
What we have been saying is that we said first, discuss principles that must inform election of leaders. Then in the last sentence, we open it first and say, you can start talking to names, but base the names on the principles. The actual nomination will be in September. That process is very important if we're not going to have accidental succession. Because if we don't have that debate, we'll elect people because we love them. Then will not be different to the primaries in the US, where they elect a president because this president is handsome, or elect a president because he's a billionaire and he talks like he says America first, and cause all sorts of harm. Will not be different. But if we base it on the principles documented in the Through the Eye of the Needle, a well-known document of the ANC, then if we don't do that, we're running a risk of accidental succession.
All right, so if I'm getting you correctly, you're saying perhaps the greater majority misinterpreted the message, that you were not actually closing the debate around succession. What you were saying was that let's confine ourselves to the kind of leader we want. And then after that, you wanted the principles to inform. And then beyond that, you go on to talk about names.
Because if you nominate a particular person, you must be able to say, we think this comrade will fit the cause, because with this program, which will come today, we think we need this kind of a leader. Test the names against those principles. By the time we go to nominations, we nominate leaders on the basis of having tried to assess them, rather than just doing thumb sucking. You see, you will see that there have been structures that have been issuing names And to me, that is ill-discipline in the first place. And number two, is actually a question of the risk of populism and adventurism. That tendency destroyed great revolutions. If you go to the history of China, you will see cultural revolution featuring prominently as a chapter in their history that they want to forget because the Leap Forward program didn't succeed. They got into cultural revolution, which was a watered-down version which based on populism and adventurism, wanting to win support and popularity instantly. The result was a disaster.
So you want everybody to shy away, at least from the party, shy away from the politics of personality at this point and rather focus on the attributes of a good leader.
That's it. So that, and even discuss names and say, what about so-and-so? Does it fit this criteria? And then by the time we nominate, you nominate a leader on the basis of a track record, capabilities, and having debated those and understanding them.
Mr. Mantashe, thank you very much for joining us. Let's free you to enjoy the evening. We'll meet tomorrow.
Enkosi kakhulu.
Siyabonga. Cindy, that was the Secretary General of the African National Congress talking to me and telling us, in fact, where he clarified that they have not been stifling debate around succession. What they have been doing is at least trying to stress the need to have conversations around the type of leader without giving names. So for them, they've clarified they are not stifling debate. They'd rather shy away from the culture of personality or politics of personality and more of the kind of leader that should take them well beyond or into 2019.